Family right here. That's what it's all about.
He's into the end zone. He caught it. Are you kidding me with that catch, JJ?
Only 2 games remain in the 2023 regular season as the Vikings ring in the new year at US Bank Stadium on Sunday Night Football. This is the Week 17 edition of Vikings Weekly. I'm Tatum, that's Gabe, and the Vikes are still in the playoff hunt against a Packers team on Sunday night.
I'm going to keep this short. New Year's Eve football.
Yeah.
Packers, Vikings. What else do you need to get excited for Vikings football? I'm so excited for Week 17, and we get an opportunity to see if this Vikings team can really get over the hump and getting back into the playoff picture. Coming up on the show, we sit down with Vikings linebacker Jordan Hicks. Also, head coach Kevin O'Connell gives his thoughts on what the Vikings need to do to make the playoffs. And we wrap today's show with our friend Frank Caliendo, who stops by to share a few words right here on Vikings Weekly.
The Vikings have struggled with injuries so far this season. Unfortunately, Sunday was no different. Tight end TJ Hawkinson and outside linebacker DJ Wanham suffered season-ending injuries. And now, head coach Kevin O'Connell must prepare the next man up for the Packers.
Yeah, when it comes to border battles or rivalry games, we all know the records don't matter. The only thing that really is important is the fact that you get bragging rights after the game. And in this week's edition of X's and O's, head coach Kevin O'Connell addresses just what the Vikings need to do to get the last word on Sunday against the Green Bay Packers.
And I picked this up because I want to read this correctly. I don't understand the line of questioning with a couple of the recent press conferences of, quote, trying to get explosive playing into the interceptions. Yeah. Okay, end quote. And here's what I don't understand is I don't understand the alternative. And if something is built around a strength, getting down the field with a passing game, that's the strength of this offense. You know, as you're wheeling through quarterbacks, I would imagine you can't just jettison it. You understand what I'm saying? I just don't understand it.
Yeah, I think there's core philosophies, there's beliefs. I think going into that football game, thinking about how many snaps we had really had Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, and TJ Hawkinson on the field for this year. We want to be aggressive when we feel like maybe at times we could have been more aggressive, right, given those guys more opportunities. We've kind of learned throughout these first 32 games or so and a huge chunk without Justin this season. We kind of know where to take the game based upon not letting our best player be taken away. It would essentially, the analogy that I gave our coaching staff is just because Michael Jordan was doubled or Kobe Bryant was doubled, it didn't mean that John Paxson always shot the ball. Yeah. It meant that sometimes we were going to try to design a play to help Michael Jordan be Michael Jordan. And right. I think Justin Jefferson is a miraculous player. I think he's as competitive as any player I've ever been around. In that game, these explosives that we had opportunities at on the very last play, throughout the game, the first 4th and 2, there's designs in place to try to help the quarterback just play and trust their footwork, trust their reads, put the ball in play to our playmakers, and it is amazing to watch in some of the games, even since losing Kirk, when we've done that for chunks of football games, the amount of success we can have. There is time of possession, PA. There is a responsibility to play complementary, but we wanted to score some points in that game. I have a lot of respect for Detroit and the way they can score points. We wanted to, for the sake of time of possession, risking being in 3rd and 7 plus multiple times against that team. We had a good plan for Hutchinson. He had multiple people on him throughout the game. I felt like the game plan gave us an opportunity to win. I think that the game plan we had, take away a couple of those turnovers, which are learning opportunities for all of us, that could have been a game we were in the 30s and the 40s. And, we've played a lot of close games, and we want to try to win games and not always be in one-score games, but it is the nature of the NFL. But you're not going to run away from people by, always being conservative or always being aggressive. It's that balance of trusting in your players to go make plays, and they wouldn't be in this building if we didn't trust them.
Well, as the playoff picture sits today, the Vikings are outside looking in. However, if the Vikings win out and either the Rams or the Seahawks lose one of their next 2 games, the Vikings can secure the final playoff spot in the NFC. No easy task, But with the veteran leadership that the Vikings have, the sky's the limit, Tatum.
That's right. One of those veterans is linebacker Jordan Hicks, who, before his injury in Week 10, was playing some of the best football in his 9 seasons. It seemed at first like a routine injury, until it wasn't. And if it wasn't caught on time, it could have ended his playing career altogether. I sat down with Jordan Hicks to talk about that moment and what has transpired over the past 6 weeks as he returned to the field this past weekend.
Understand something. When we out here, it's about us. Always, every time we step on this field, it's about us. All right? Have each other's back, have a great mindset, and let's have some damn fun. Huh? Back is on 3. 1, 2, 3.
Jordan, 6 weeks ago, you had emergency surgery, and then flash forward to Sunday, you played all 79 defensive snaps.
Yeah.
How would you describe the last 2 months?
It's been a whirlwind of emotions.
We did place Jordan Hicks on injured reserve. He's doing very well. Was discharged, pretty quickly from the hospital with all things considered.
You get in situations like that, you never think you're gonna possibly have your, leg split wide open, and real damage and amputation. All these words getting thrown around. So you never realize you never think it's gonna be you, and when it is, you just attack it, and you take time to look back on all you've done, and you take time to be thankful for your family and all the blessings that are around, right? The opportunity to go out there on Sundays. But yeah, it's been a whirlwind of emotions. It's been a heck of a ride, but glad to be back out there.
You suffered the injury on what was more of a routine hit, a collision with a helmet, and it just kind of went downhill from there for you. When did you realize something was wrong?
So I knew something was happening in my shin, but it wasn't until the third quarter after a long drive, I came out and I told the trainers, I'm like, I have nothing left. My foot, literally, I couldn't flex it, dorsiflex it up. It was just stuck down. I had no strength in it. So told them I had nothing left, and at that point they wanted to monitor it. I went back into the locker room, and the moment my adrenaline came down, the pain level instantly spiked. And at that point I knew it was something serious.
You had never felt anything like that before,
No,
had you?
by far the worst pain I've ever felt.
That's crazy. And to think, I mean, to be honest, when it came out that it was compartment syndrome, I had to Google it myself. Yeah. I'd never really heard of it before. Did you hear that at all? Like, were you listening? Did they mention that to you?
At the end of the day, they knew. I was told, we're gonna go in, we're gonna drain it, we're gonna get the blood out, and if you wake up with a scar about this big, or a cut on your leg about this big, don't be surprised. That's when something we had to do.
I went to the hospital yesterday and saw him. He's in good spirits. He's already rearing to get back. So,
Gabe, it is truly remarkable what Jordan Hicks has been through, especially now that he is suiting up in a game 6 weeks later. He's got a 12-inch scar on his shin, and he's now custom fitted to a carbon fiber shin guard, much like what soccer players wear to help him in the games. And of course, you can catch that full interview on Vikings Game Day Live right here on Fox 9 this Sunday at 9:30.
Huge shout out to our medical team, getting Jordan and the rest of our injured athletes back up to speed before they could actually, figure it out mentally and physically. So just happy to have Jordan Hicks back, but also happy that this Minnesota Vikings team were able to get out in the community this past week. They shared the warmth in the annual Winter Wonderland community event this past week at TCOPC. Let's check it out.
We believe strongly that, to whom much is given, much is required, and it's important to, if you have more than enough, to give and to help people who need help.
I mean, as soon as I got the text that it was an event, I was happy. I was already expecting it, so it's fun. That's pretty cool that they're doing that, giving them coats and stuff like that, especially with how cold it is over here in Minnesota. I couldn't imagine anybody going without a coat over here, so I like that they're getting everybody coats.
Merry Christmas.
Everybody deserves a special Christmas, and if we can do that through this event, then it's a night well spent.
Coming up after the break, Cy Amundsen chats Border Battle 125 with comedian Frank Caliendo. And we have a special announcement for Vikings fans heading to US Bank Stadium for the game on Sunday night. We'll be right back with more on Vikings Weekly. Welcome back to Vikings Weekly. I'm Gabe Henderson. That's Tatum Everett. And week number 17 is upon us as the Green Bay Packers come to town for the New Year's Eve edition of Border Battle number 125. There's a lot weighing on the line this upcoming Sunday. There's a primetime game. Of course, it's a rivalry game. But more importantly, this is a game for the Vikings to, I guess, solidify their chances of finally getting into that playoff picture. So a lot of momentum is riding on Sunday night's matchup, Tatum.
That's right, Gabe. And I'm not sure if you've been following the Tailgate. It's one of our most fun content pieces that we do. It's a podcast by our friend and comedian Cy Amundsen. He invites opponents from his comedian world, his comedy world, to be on there with him, and they laugh and talk about the matchups. Well, guess who was the guest this week?
Who is it?
Frank Caliendo. You did mention his name a few times already in the show. But it's superstar Frank Caliendo. He's a Bears and a Packers fan. Don't quite get that one, but maybe he'll explain it in the podcast. So check it out.
It is Packer Week, everybody, and it is essentially a do-or-die week for both teams. Joining us on the Tailgate to discuss all things Packers and all things end of the season, the great Frank Caliendo. Hey, buddy, how are you?
Doing quite well. Listen, is Packer Viking week huge for you guys? I mean, growing up for me, there was a big rivalry but it was Bears Packers, and I was born in Chicago but grew up in Milwaukee. So we used to have our relatives from Chicago would send us all the Bears stuff. So we're talking 85 Bears, like 6 foot by 4 foot posters. And we would hang them up because, you know, there was just better stuff at that point from Chicago. So we had the giant Bears posters, and then the 4 or 5 guys who didn't have mustaches on them, we drew them on there. Because at 85, we were just engulfed by my, Italian relatives. And you're like, Frank, you got to support the Bears, And then everybody's going, the Bears. And all that kind of stuff. So, and at the time it was like the Alindi and Fonte Packers and, growing up, and it was Mikowski and, that crew before the different quarterbacks before we got to Favre coming in.
Yeah, everybody before they hired Holmgren, and he hired the greatest coaching staff in the history of professional football.
Right, the coaching tree that will live forever.
This is a funny thing that Packer fans do, Frank, and I think you don't even intend it. Some of them know, because Packers week is everything to Vikings fan. You hit it on the head, and there's nothing more hurtful than somebody you don't like not thinking about you. So when a Packers fan is like, is it a big deal to you? Because we think about Bears, like that is a fun little jab to the side heart.
No. It was half on purpose and half like real. It was honest, but I thought that might be the case. So that's why I said it.
It worked.
The Moss Vikings, those years, honestly, those were big. That was big rivalry time. That was some of the most I'd felt it.
I know a lot of people know you and know your career, but I don't know that everybody knows that you started the way almost all Midwestern comedians started. You had to go on the road. You had to do one-nighters. You had to do the rooms in the Midwest. What was it like doing Madden and doing some of these impressions and talking sports, coming up in a place where I would say the people's sense of humor is it doesn't exist when it comes to their favorite team?
I don't know. The Madden stuff I would do is always neutral, though. You know, like if it was the stuff about Brett Favre, Brett Favre is the Brett Favre of Brett Favre. So without Brett Favre, you wouldn't have Brett Favre. And that's what that's all about. So if you love Brett Favre in Green Bay, people love that you're just talking about him.
Right.
And, if you're somewhere else, you're like, yeah, that's all Madden talks about is Brett Favre. I'm sick of it. So it works both ways. As opposed to picking a side of something. I mean, and usually you can get a joke in here or there, making fun of somebody's team, but you better come back, quickly before somebody else says something. It was more of a problem that people didn't know the sports stuff that way. Because when people first come out to see you at comedy clubs, they're not necessarily, you're an attraction. You're not necessarily selling the tickets. So they might just be somebody who's showing up that night for a show. And if they're not sports fans, they wouldn't even get that Madden part. So that would be more the issue for me than anything in those days.
One thing I appreciate about you greatly, and we have a mutual friend, Mike McCrae.
Yeah.
And Mike McCrae, who I've spent a lot of time with in my life, he does what you do, which is you guys are fantastic impressionists, but you are fantastic comedians. And so the writing takes over, and the impression is almost, I don't want to belittle it by saying that it's secondary, but the impression lives within the larger concept of well-written comedy. And I think, you're kind of the height of that with Madden existing early, and then Madden's referencing a joke that you did, kind of his character flowing throughout your set. Was there a moment where that happened was that intentional? Did it happen on stage? Was there just one day where you're like, holy look at, like, how did that come to be?
Madden explaining things on the, it actually came from John Caponero was watching me. Do you know Johnny Caponero? Yeah. Caponero's like, explain the jokes. Like I did it once or something in the show. He's like, you're doing the greatest color analyst of all time. Explain the jokes. Explain every joke. I go, but then if you have to explain the joke, isn't the joke not that good? Not if it's in your acting. Explain them as John Madden. Good night, people. I touched on it a little bit, and then he was like, yeah, you should just use that. And it really, I wasn't even, I kind of did it as a callback, a single callback. And he's like, no, don't just use it as a little callback. Explain joke after joke after joke with Madden. And as Madden got out of, being on TV, I ended up transitioning that same thing to Morgan Freeman. I would just explain the jokes, narrate them as Morgan Freeman if somebody didn't get them. So, but that's really the metamorphosis of Madden, like becoming so much of my act there was because John Caponero said to me, just do it. Just get in there and do it. That's my opener.
It really is so smartly written. The Fox pregame show, getting 2.5 minutes to have to be funny, be relevant, not make the league angry, not make the sponsors angry, not make the station angry, and still have people go, that was funny enough to watch. That is, I believe that is the toughest spot in anything sports humor related to be in that position. And
also you have to remember it's on tape.
Yeah.
So you can't, it's taped and done. So the best things on the Fox pregame show to me, when things go wrong and they start ripping into each other, when Terry Bradshaw completely forgets what he's talking about, or the camera zooms into Howie Long to be smart, or whatever it might be, we're going to start ripping on each other. And that's the fun part. That's the fun. It's the camaraderie and chemistry. And when you come in and you're a taped piece, you only get beginning and end with them. So there's no interaction in between, and there's no changing to feel how it's going. Yeah. Some of the best times I ever had were when I was in studio with them, just goofing around with them. And then I could go from thing to thing and do some voices and do some jokes and make fun of them, and they could make fun of me back. And it was a back and forth. Remember, when you're doing that 2 to 2.5 minutes, it's just straight. You made your decisions and you went with them. The average person doesn't realize you're on tape, even though it looks completely different, looks more filmed. It's edited.
You think, let's throw it to Frank live. Yeah.
Yeah. People just think that it's like, no, there's nothing live about that. So yeah, I do think it, and it's the sports mentality, doing comedy within a sports mentality, which is, what are you doing for me this week? That mentality is there throughout sports entertainment, especially that in terms of the old school TV stuff. Yeah. I mean, it's those buildings are based on, John Madden and him ruling the roost and whoever was there at the time, those old school, and they weren't old school at the time, but, Fox, it was super innovative.
Last thing before we get you out of here, Frank, I want to know, and I'm sure our listeners do, I mean, you've had such a cool career. Is there a moment that you look back on, or a couple moments that you're like, that was it? That's something that is fun to hold on to forever as a sports fan.
I can remember one thing that always comes to mind is I was in a green room at Fox, just sitting in a dressing room, talking to Terry Bradshaw. Franco Harris walks in, who's passed away since then, but and Terry and Franco hadn't seen each other in 20, 30 years, whatever it was. And nobody, and they were having like this mini reunion, just chatting that just came across each other, and nobody was asking me to leave the room. That was one of those like, oh, you just get to be a part of this stuff. So that's one of those huge moments that I realized, oh my gosh, this is crazy. Or when another thing was just simple, when Jimmy Johnson's hair was different one day, like just totally different. And I could just call the control room and a producer and go, what's going on with Jimmy's hair? And he was doing something for Survivor or something. I remember he was on Survivor at the time. So I was like, wow, that's cool. I could just call Fox and just ask what's going on in the situation. Another little thing would be just backstage and Terry Bradshaw, grabbing, so my son was playing with a broom outside of the studio, and Terry Bradshaw, we're going to call him Sweeper. That's Sweeper. And then Terry started showing him, here's how you sweep, guy. And then Howie came out later, and he's holding Joey, my son. He's like, we call this the discus. And he's just holding him like he's holding a discus. So it was those moments around these Hall of Fame giant personalities that were really great. That are just moments for me that I always remember.
Well, you're a king, Frank. We appreciate it a ton. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, now after that, I feel like I have to check out the entire episode, which conveniently can be found at Vikings.com or wherever you get your podcasts. Gabe, I think that about does it for this episode.
Whoa. Before Vikings fans, before you leave the show, I want to give you guys a heads up. There will be another light show if you are in attendance at US Bank Stadium. It's pretty simple how you can access that light show. So first, download the Vikings app. 2, enable your microphone. That's key. If you don't enable your microphone, chances are you won't be able to participate, because once that clock hits 17, the pregame clock hits 17 at US Bank Stadium, the lights are going to go off, and then your cell phone lights are going to light up the entire stadium. So it's going to be crazy. Looking forward to seeing how Vikings fans, how everyone shows up and show their support with their lights on Sunday. So
yeah, you could also find the QR codes all around the stadium or in the program book. Well, we cannot wait to ring in the new year in US Bank Stadium with 66,000 of our closest friends. The Vikings look to stay in the playoff picture with a game against the Packers, again at US Bank Stadium, 7:20 kickoff on Sunday Night Football.
Yeah.
For Gabe, I'm Tatum. Thank you so much for watching Vikings Weekly, and we'll see you guys again next week.